In today's episode, we speak with Dr. Bryce Pritchett III. He is a world-renowned leader in merger integration, strategy, corporate culture, and organizational change. With over 20 million copies of his 30-plus books in print, he is an absolute expert in this area. In this episode, you will learn the 4 secrets to making a quantum leap. As well, why it's an absolute necessity to be absolutely obsessed.
Welcome to this edition of Peak Performance Podcast with your host, Thor Conklin. Thor will be sharing the necessary tools, strategies, and psychology you'll need to become a peak performer in any area of your life or business.
Thor Conklin here. We give you the tricks, the tips, the tools, the strategy, the technology, and the psychology peak performers use in order to get more done and execute at the highest level. If you know what to do but struggle with getting it all done, or simply want to raise your game to the next level, this podcast is for you. Sit back and enjoy. Dr. Bryce Pritchett III is the founder, CEO of PRITCHETT LP, a 40-year-old consulting firm recognized internationally for its thought leadership in merger integration strategy, corporate culture, and organization change. He is consultant on some of the world's largest mergers and acquisitions. Pritchett's client list stands as a who's who of business. Virtually all of the Fortune 500 have used some combination of the firm's consulting, training, and handbooks. He has a PhD in psychology from Texas Tech University. Since founding the firm, he has authored over half a dozen million sellers on merger, culture, and change, with over 20 million copies of his 30-plus books in print. Well, Bryce, thank you very much for being a part of the show today. I know our listeners are going to get so much value out of your knowledge. Working with some of the top boards and organizations for the last 40 years, I know you've got so much to share. We've got a short time today, so I wanted to dive right into it. And I wanted to ask you, and by the way, let me back up just one moment. The reason I got in touch with you is I had a gentleman on the show a couple weeks ago, and one of the questions I ask a lot is, what is the best book that you've ever read in your life? And he said, U Squared. And I said, I've never heard about that book. I've got some studying to do because I really respect this individual. And then I started diving into what you do, and you are absolutely a master in this area. And I know our listeners are going to get so much out of it. So why don't I just start with, how did you come up to write the U Squared handbook?
Well, thank you for the kind comments, Thor. It's kind of an interesting story. It just kind of bubbled up, the book did. I was vice president of a psychological consulting firm in Chicago at the time. And one of the main revenue flows for the firm was management and executive assessments. And we had just top flight clients. I mean, like Pfizer and Motorola and Parker Pen, City of Chicago, Playboy. I mean, it was just a killer client list. And so I evaluated hundreds of top level executives that were being considered for a new hire position or maybe a promotion. And I was kind of struck as the years went by, as they're a little over 2 years, by how you could take a couple of people that seemed to be very equivalent in terms of their academic credentials, how they would test out in terms of intellectual capacities, looks, personality. You couldn't see anything that should be any kind of significant dividing line. But you would find a person who was making 4 times what another person was. And that contrast, I was struck by that. And then after I left that firm, came to Dallas and started my own consulting firm. And I ended up focusing my firm on merger integration strategy. We were the first firm in the world to specialize in merger integration strategy. And so I, once again, was kind of watching what was happening. And we'd say, okay, here's a firm. It's a $500 million firm. We'll call it Company A. And let's say it's growing at 8% a year. It's doing good, just organic growth. Okay, here's Company B. It's a $500 million firm. And it decides one day it's going to acquire Company C, which is another $500 million firm. Well, all of a sudden, Company B has gone to 100% growth in one step. And it's the same kind of thing I'd seen with executives at an individual level. Some would skip rungs on the achievement ladder. We tend to think of success as a very incremental process. And I became drawn to this idea that achievement does not have to be that incremental. Take this step, okay, now the next logical step, now the next. There were people and there were organizations, major organizations, that were making quantum leaps. They were skipping several rungs on that ladder. And I began to watch that and study that. And that's how I came to write U Squared. It's about breakthrough change. It actually, I guess the U Squared message works for anyone in terms of kind of goal achievement, but it's about that step change. And so that's how the book came to be written. And it's a very, very, as you know, it's a very slender piece. I've always written very tightly, I think, very compressed style. And I think it's kind of interesting because some people don't know anything about the book, or they might glance at it and not take it seriously. But that little handbook, if you will, is $1 million book. It has produced noticeably over $1 million. So that's just a quickie sketch on that as to how it came about.
Well, and I love also that so much of it is, in order to get where you're going, you can't keep doing the same things that you've done in the past. And you can make those incremental steps, or you can take those quantum leaps. And in that book, you really talk about those quantum leaps.
Exactly. And the interesting thing is you've got many, many people that write and speak about personal achievement and success and so forth. And my background is different from most of those because my background is professional psychology. I come from the academic discipline of getting a PhD in psychology. And so in writing the book, it was with a deep respect for the fact that, okay, how are human beings made? How do people function as individuals and as organizations? And that large corporations have basically been my research lab. You can look at the Fortune 1000 list of companies, and about 97% of those have used my company in some way, either in our consulting or our training programs or our publications. So that has been my test bed. And in many of these instances, it's fascinating to watch because change is forced on individuals. Like in a merger, bang, all of a sudden they're dealing with a far, far bigger set of demands. So anyway, there is that experience and kind of knowledge base that comes out of professional psychology, being a licensed psychologist in Illinois and Texas, and also knowing the corporate world and spending 4 decades working with those people as they go through just major upheaval, major change.
Yeah, I spent 15 years in the M&A world working with private equity firms, and it was amazing how you could take 2 great companies, and if you didn't get it right, you could literally take down 2 great companies in the merger.
Oh yeah, it's a complicated process, and our focus is on the integration process. We're not really involved in the deal making, but once the papers are signed and all of the transitional stuff, the upheaval, the change, that's where we come to play.
And it's so important.
Yeah. But it's also a time of amazing opportunity because it hits people and it kind of shatters the status quo. And you've got a window of opportunity there to do some really profound things. You can accomplish amazing things in an organization during a merger that you just get too much resistance during a routine world. And so I think that same thing kind of holds true at an individual level. When somebody goes for the quantum leap, when they try to skip several rungs in the ladder, if you will, It brings a new set of personal dynamics, and it's kind of what we're writing to in the U Squared book. It's like unconventional growth calls for unconventional solutions. And I think the U Squared message is unconventional in some very significant ways. And yet it is amazingly simple strategy, if you will, for growth.
The best strategies usually are.
I think you're right.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. Are any of the strategies that you use with your corporations in bringing two entities together into a merger, does any of this apply to a couple coming together and merging their two lives?
That's a good question, Thor. I don't know that I've ever been asked that per se. Now, we know that when people talk about mergers and acquisitions, they're often spoken of as a corporate marriage. And when an individual male and woman, when they decide to get married, they're absolutely setting them up for some major transition and change. But that is a provocative question because I don't think I have ever turned it toward two people who decided to get married and how the U Squared principles might be so instructive or helpful to them in that process, you know.
Yeah, just something. I want to look into that further because what I find very interesting is that a corporation really is just made up of people anyway. It's made up of leaders. And I find so many of the techniques that peak performers, top performers are using are so cross-contextual. What's working in business, what's working in athletics is also what's working in marriages.
Yeah, I think so. And once again, the key concept, I guess, of U Squared, and it's really the kind of the founding principle of my company here in Dallas, is this concept of minimum effective dose, which is getting this idea of how simple can we make this. If you look at so much that is written about success methods, you know, and personal achievement and how to manage one's life, I'm kind of an outlier, I guess, or have a little bit different perspective than some, particularly as it relates to the U Squared message. Again, I would emphasize that U Squared is about how to make a quantum leap in your life. So it's not about, it doesn't go out there and address, okay, you need to set goals in all 5 major facets of your life, for example, like a financial goal, a physical goal, a spiritual goal, family goal, and so on. It's really quite different from that. It's about singularity. It's about focus. It's about minimizing what your particular driving ambition is at that point in time and how to make that amazing leap in performance. And that's kind of how the minimum effective dose begins to apply and just the 4 key principles underneath the quantum leap strategy.
Go into a little detail on those 4 strategies, those core components.
Yeah. Well, I'd start with this as just kind of a prefacing comment. You get right down to it, most success methods have a depressingly high failure rate. They just do. Or if you want to use kind of a formal technical term, they have very low adherence. And by that, I mean people don't stick with the program until they hit their goals. And so you get that low adherence in the medical profession. People won't stay on their medicine. They won't stay on a treatment program. You'll see it when people are wanting to exercise and get in good physical condition and the like. And I think that part of the problem is people very commonly operate with too many goals. One of the handbooks I wrote, which is titled Fast Growth, and it's about accelerating your career, we talk about the need to be sharply pointed rather than well-rounded. If you look at most super high achievers, this has been my experience, you don't see this beautifully well-rounded person. You see someone who's so unbelievably specialized. They know what they want. They know what counts to them. They know what's precious in terms of their aspirations. And that's where they bring all of their personal resources to bear. Certainly, in my opinion, that's critical if you want to make a quantum leap.
Yeah, they're not researching work-life balance books.
That's right. That's right. But back to your point or your question, the four things that I point to as the critical core or the minimum effective dose formula for a quantum leap is, first of all, you need to know your aiming point. What is it that's your magnificent obsession? What is going to be magnetic north that pulls everything you've got toward it, okay? So that clear aiming point. You can call it a goal, but in the U squared concept, it's not just a goal. It's more like an obsession. It's more like, I want this so badly. This is so important to me. So you need that aiming point because that's how you engage the heart. That's how you get passion working for you. So aiming point is the first thing in the strategy. Point two is pursuit. Simple, relentless pursuit. You got to move. You can sit and visualize till the cows come home. You can sit in your office or study at home and say affirmations to yourself. But we're talking about a tangible move toward that aiming point. Relentless pursuit. Okay? That's number two. The third thing, and this is where we get into the more unconventional stuff, is what we call a quantum leap ritual. And this is in that neighborhood of the visualization process. But we talk about someone give me 12 minutes. Give me 12 minutes in the morning, hopefully another 12 minutes at night. But this is kind of like a period of reverie. It's where you get quiet, you relax. It's helpful if a person has a picture or an image of some kind that represents that aiming point, what that U squared condition or state is going to be like. To have that, it makes it easier for your brain to latch onto that and start helping you get there. So you get still, you relax, you read your goal, preferably out loud, and you memorize it. I've got a set of 3 goals. Every night I'm reading those goals. Except I don't read them anymore. I've got them so compressed, so tightly defined that they're like 2 or 3 sentences each. But they're all interconnected. It's all about getting to that aiming point of mine. So I don't have to read it. I know what it is.
Price, would this be your annual goal or would this be your lifetime goal?
No, it's more of a lifetime goal. It's more of, and I would say that a couple of them are really more, and I'm kind of contradicting myself, but I'm going to reconcile that in a minute. One of them has to do with the financial target, but it's connected. My real breakthrough goal is it's a business goal. And frankly, it has to do with our CLIPS program that we're launching just now at PRITCHETT, and I'll probably chat about in a minute. But that business goal is my quantum leap goal, okay? And then I've got a physical goal. It's just it's a condition I want to maintain. It's a state, it's my physical being and how I want it to be maintained. Third is financial goal. The financial goal is tightly buttoned together with the CLIPS goal, the breakthrough goal, the U squared goal. But anyway, as you say the goal to yourself or read the goal, if you just run your finger around the edge, outline that image of the goal. Why do this? It's a behavioral science principle that I'm bringing to bear that I think brings real strength. It just makes it more physical. It makes it, you get engaged more, and it becomes a little bit more real. Anyway, and then the final step of this little quantum leap ritual process is after then you just sit. You can have your eyes closed. I don't care. It's just kind of a state of reverie. And you're not working. You're not busting it, trying to come up with ideas or anything. You're just letting it be there in your mind. And ideas, if you do this on a consistent basis, ideas began to bubble up. They just float through your head and they will come to you. And this is where the magic takes place. This is where the gods begin to speak to you. And the irony is, people will not do this. They screw themselves up. It seems trivial. It seems like a waste of time. They don't feel like they're accomplishing anything, and they blow it off. And I just can't tell people how important that is to do that and make it a habit. Then the final step is jot down any idea or next step or just a creative thought that might pass through your mind during this reverie process that's going on. So that's the quantum leap ritual. So you got your aiming point, your goal, the relentless pursuit, the quantum leap ritual, and then tracking your results. Tracking your results. You need a metric. You need something that monitors what you've done. And again, it is so powerful, so critical to the quantum leap process. And people are sorry as can be at doing that as well. But anyway, that is it. Now, it sounds so simple. People won't do it. But you need to rely on very few variables. You need to keep it small, keep it simple. But quantum leap moves, that relentless pursuit, it needs to be simple. It needs to be trackable. And as I say in the handbook, quantum leap, it's not about trying harder. It's actually about trying easier.
Yes.
And trying differently. Once you've selected the bare minimum to get started, well, get started.
You know, it's interesting. I have a similar ritual, and I was having difficulty kind of keeping it up and doing it on a consistent basis. And then a mentor of mine said, choose a piece of furniture, a stool, a chair, a couch, something that is unusual to your work environment, and then do the ritual in that chair. And that became my special place for that time of thinking and reflecting.
Yeah. I think that there are a lot of kind of idiosyncratic ways or, individually preferred ways of going about this. The quantum leap ritual, that simple little process, and people call it different things. That's just what I happen to call it. It's where the magic happens. That's where the gods began to speak. And it's the kind of thing that keeps your brain programmed. What it does is it activates the reticular activating system in your brain that is the goal-seeking mechanism that, all of a sudden, if you really have that sharp aiming point, and if you're relentlessly moving toward that, I don't care how small the steps are initially, and you're living the ritual, tracking your progress, it all just coheres. And people, after I wrote U Squared, which actually was written in 1989, people would call me. I'd get calls or letters or whatever. That was back before you really had email working. But people would say, I love this book. It's changed my life. But how do you really do this? And I would get back to them and I'd say, you're making this harder than it is.
Yeah.
You're trying to, and people bog down in the planning. They think they've got to plan this thing. You don't. If you got your aiming point and you will move relentlessly toward that and give your mind that reverie space and track your progress, it's that simple. Now, the U Squared handbook, although it's extremely tight message, it gets into the logic behind this and the importance of it being a goal that really matters to you. And then it's your goal. It's not your wife's or husband's goal for you. It's not your boss's goal for you. It's something that comes from so deep inside you, it ain't going to leave,
Yes. That concludes part 1 of our interview with Dr. Price Pritchett. Please tune in later this week for part 2. If you haven't already done so, please head over to iTunes, subscribe to the show. After listening to the episodes, please leave us a 5-star rating and review. Please share these episodes with friends, family, coworkers, or anyone that could benefit from this information. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Thor Conklin. The website is thorconklin.com. The email is info@thorconklin. While at the website, please sign up for our weekly newsletter for additional tricks, tips, tools, and psychology on how to be a peak performer. Until tomorrow, have an absolutely amazing day.